What if everything you knew about history was just the surface? Hidden in the shadows, a secret budget has funded operations the world was never meant to see. Tonight, we uncover the chilling truth behind the CIA's black budget and the people who vanished trying to expose it.
The file was never meant to be found. On a cold evening in 1998, long after most employees had gone home, Daniel Reeves sat alone in a quiet records room deep inside a government building. The lights above him buzzed softly, and the air smelled of dust and old paper. His job was simple and often boring. He checked financial reports, matched numbers, and searched for mistakes that others might have missed. Most nights, nothing unusual ever happened. But that night felt different. While scanning through a pile of aging documents, Daniel noticed a thin folder hidden between two thick files. It had no official seal, no department name, and no clear label. Just two words typed in small, plain letters: Black Budget. He paused, staring at it for a moment. Something about it didn't feel right. Slowly, he opened the folder. Inside were pages filled with numbers, large numbers, payments made over many years, sometimes millions at a time. But there were no explanations, no project titles, no approval signatures, just dates, amounts, and locations that didn't seem connected to anything he recognized. Daniel leaned closer to the desk, his eyes moving faster across the pages. These transactions went back decades. Some were from the 1960s, others were recent. The strangest part was how carefully they were hidden. These weren't just missing details. It was as if someone had tried to erase the story behind every number. He felt a chill run through him. One page caught his attention. It listed a project code, but instead of a name, there was only a blank space. Yet the funding for it continued year after year, never stopping. Even more disturbing, the most recent payment was dated just a few weeks earlier. Someone was still using this budget. Daniel looked around the room. The building was silent. The long hallway outside was empty. Still, he couldn't shake the feeling that he wasn't alone anymore. As he carefully turned another page, the overhead light flickered once, then again. He froze. For a brief second, he thought he heard footsteps somewhere beyond the door. Slow, careful, then nothing. His heart began to beat faster. He quickly closed the folder and slid it back where he found it. But the damage was already done. He had seen something he wasn't supposed to see. The next morning, Daniel returned early, hoping to look at the file again. But when he reached the shelf, his stomach dropped. The folder labeled Black Budget was gone, and no one in the office seemed to know it ever existed. The numbers didn't disappear with the file. They stayed in Daniel's mind like a warning he couldn't silence. Days after the folder vanished, he began working quietly, carefully. He no longer searched for the missing document itself. Instead, he traced its shadow. Late at night, when most of the office lights were off, he reviewed archived financial summaries from past decades. He wasn't looking for titles anymore. He was looking for patterns. And he found them. Hidden between normal defense spending and routine operations were strange gaps, blocks of money that moved without explanation. Large amounts were transferred during tense moments in history. The early 1960s, the late 1970s, the final years of the Cold War. Each time global tensions rose, the unexplained spending increased.
Daniel printed out timelines and laid them across his kitchen table. He connected dates with string like a detective chasing a killer. The pattern was clear. Whenever a public crisis appeared on the world stage, money flowed into something unseen. One entry stood out. In the late 1960s, a large payment was sent to a remote region in Eastern Europe. Public records from that same week reported a factory explosion in a small town, but there were no photos, no survivor interviews. The town seemed to vanish from media coverage within days. Another record showed funding for what was labeled only as external stabilization. The amount was massive. The year matched a well-known political coup overseas. Official history blamed local unrest, but the financial trail suggested something deeper, something guided from the shadows. Daniel felt his breathing grow heavier as he turned another page. Then he saw it again, a repeated phrase buried inside coded references, Project Nightfall. It appeared in the 1960s, then again in the 1980s, and once more just a few years ago. The funding attached to it never fully stopped. It simply changed shape, moved under different headings, and continued flowing. There was no description of what Project Nightfall actually was, only numbers. And those numbers were enormous. Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the wall. This wasn't random accounting. This was a long-term operation, something that survived presidents, wars, and public investigations. And if it had lasted this long, it meant one thing. It was still active. As Daniel closed his laptop, a quiet fear settled in his chest. If Project Nightfall was ongoing, then who was running it now?
The voice on the other end of the phone sounded like it came from another time. It was late at night when Daniel finally gathered the courage to make the call. For days he had been staring at the old contact number he found hidden in a faded report connected to Project Nightfall. The paper looked decades old, the ink slightly blurred. He didn't even know if the number would still work, but something inside him pushed him to try. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a quiet click. A man answered, his voice low and cautious. He introduced himself as Victor Hale. Daniel's heart began to pound as he explained why he was calling. He spoke carefully, choosing his words, mentioning the hidden transactions and the name he kept seeing, Project Nightfall. There was silence on the line. For several long seconds, Victor didn't speak. Daniel thought the call had dropped, but then the man let out a slow breath. "You shouldn't be looking into that," Victor said softly. His tone wasn't angry, it was afraid. Victor claimed he had once been part of operations that were never recorded in public history. He spoke in a careful, distant way, as if every word had weight. He described missions that existed only in shadows, places where teams were sent but no official reports were ever written, situations that were handled quietly, then erased. Daniel asked him about the black budget. Victor paused again, longer this time. When he spoke, his voice was even lower. "That money doesn't just fund operations," he said. "It hides them. It makes them disappear." Daniel felt a chill run through him. He asked about Project Nightfall. What was it? What did it do? Victor didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave a warning. He said people who started asking too many questions often found their lives changing in ways they couldn't explain. Jobs were lost, records vanished, and sometimes people simply disappeared. The call ended quickly after that. Victor refused to say more. He only repeated one thing before hanging up. "Stop digging, Daniel, for your own sake." Daniel sat in silence, staring at the phone in his hand. The room suddenly felt colder. The shadows seemed deeper. The next morning, he tried to call the number again. This time, a recorded message answered. The line had been disconnected. Uneasy, Daniel searched for Victor Hale's name in public records. What he found made his stomach drop. According to official documents, Victor Hale had died 12 years ago. So who had Daniel spoken to the night before?
The first sign that something was wrong came from his computer screen. Daniel was reviewing archived financial data late one evening when his monitor suddenly went black. No warning, no error message, just darkness. A few seconds later, the system restarted on its own. When the files reappeared, several folders were missing, the exact ones he had been studying for weeks. A cold weight settled in his chest. He checked the system logs. No record of a crash, no sign of anyone accessing his terminal. It was as if the information had simply erased itself. Daniel leaned back slowly, his eyes moving around the empty office. For the first time, he felt certain he wasn't just researching something dangerous. He was being watched. In the days that followed, the strange events didn't stop. Emails he sent never reached their destination. Notes he saved disappeared overnight. Even the printed documents he kept locked in his drawer were slightly moved, as if someone had opened it and carefully put everything back. One evening, he returned to his apartment to find the front door unlocked. Nothing inside was taken. No broken glass, no mess. But his desk lamp was turned on, and a chair that he always kept pushed in was slightly pulled back. Someone had been there. Someone had searched the room. Daniel stopped sleeping properly after that. At work, the tension grew heavier. He noticed unfamiliar faces in the hallway, men in plain clothes who didn't speak to anyone. When he tried to ask a supervisor about them, he was told there were no new employees. Then, one morning, something even stranger happened. A coworker named Lisa, who also worked in the records department, didn't show up. She had been helping review old financial reports the week before. Daniel remembered her mentioning unusual transactions, the same kind he had been tracking. By lunchtime, her desk was cleared. Her computer was gone. Her name was removed from the office schedule. When Daniel asked where she was, people looked confused. Some said she must have transferred. Others claimed they didn't remember her working there at all. It was like she had been erased. That night, Daniel sat alone at his desk, staring at his screen with growing fear. As he opened a financial database, he noticed a new entry he had never seen before. It was recent, just 2 days old. He leaned closer. Under a list of active surveillance operations, one line was typed in plain, simple text. Subject: Daniel Reeves. His hands began to shake. If his name was in the system, how long had they been watching him?
They were already waiting for him. When Daniel stepped out of the elevator that morning, 2 security officers stood near his desk. Their expressions were calm, almost polite. One of them asked him to come along. No explanation, no raised voices, just a quiet request that didn't feel optional. His heartbeat echoed in his ears as they led him down a hallway he had never walked before. The building felt different now, colder, more controlled. Doors opened with key cards he didn't recognize. Cameras followed every step. They brought him into a small, windowless room. A metal table stood in the center. On top of it lay a thin folder. Daniel knew before he opened it that it wasn't about accounting. Inside were photographs, his apartment building, his car parked outside a grocery store, a close-up image of him sitting at his kitchen table, taken from an angle that made his stomach turn. There were printed transcripts of his phone call with Victor Hale. Even his internet searches were neatly listed. Every move, every thought, recorded. A man in a dark suit entered the room and sat across from him. His face was calm, unreadable. He spoke without emotion. "You've been looking into restricted funding," the man said. "You've asked questions about projects that are not meant to be discussed." Daniel tried to steady his breathing. He asked what Project Nightfall really was. The man didn't answer directly. Instead, he explained that some operations were designed to prevent chaos before it happened, that history was not always what it seemed, that certain truths, if revealed, could destabilize governments and cause panic. Then he leaned forward slightly. "You have two options," he said quietly. "You walk away, you forget what you saw, your life returns to normal. Or you continue pursuing this and your future becomes uncertain." It wasn't a threat spoken loudly. It didn't need to be. Daniel looked down at the photographs again. His home, his family. The message was clear. Minutes later, he was escorted out of the building. No charges, no paperwork, just silence. For weeks he said nothing. He returned to work. He stopped searching databases. He acted as if none of it had happened. But years later, a journalist received an anonymous package containing copied financial records labeled Black Budget. There was no return address, only a handwritten note inside. "If we never question power, who controls the truth?"